So I guess going through school, especially back in the time period that I did, to be a carpenter was just not a thing that was, made available to women or girls of any age or anything like that. And so I was sort of raised in a small country town, so that kind of even personified it a little bit more. And, because you've got some very old values, in those smaller country towns, more traditional. Yeah. And certainly, in a building game, it's a non-traditional kind of role for females to get into. So, when I was very young at school and stuff, I always wanted to be one of two things. One was, a carpenter, because I had influences around me from friends and relatives that were in the building game. And the other one was to be a police officer. Now, unfortunately, being female, I couldn't entertain the idea of being a carpenter or a joiner. And to be a police officer, I needed to be back then quite a bit taller than I am. So I missed out on both of them, quite frankly. And I ended up, by pure chance, joining the prison service. It was just, one of those sort of chance meetings where I met this guy who was head of probation and parole in New South Wales, who happened to be the uncle of my then partner. And he said to me, why don't you come join the prison service, So that's kind of where I started my working life or career life, was in the prison service. And so I did that for a number of years, and then my partner decided that they wanted to move to Queensland to be with family. And so subsequently I left the service in New South Wales and went to Queensland. And I think I was there for about maybe a couple of weeks, and I saw an advertisement, because I was job hunting, and I saw an advertisement for apprentices with Queensland Master Builders. And so I thought, what the hell? We're a few years down the track since I left school, give it a go. And luckily for me, I could have had, at that point in time, they were trying to get women into non-traditional trades, which I didn't know. It was just by pure chance that I rung up this ad, and they were like, they couldn't get me in the door quick enough. And I saw the ad on the Saturday, and by the Monday afternoon following, I had an apprenticeship with Queensland Master Builders as a carpenter and joiner. So, I was elated, of course, because that was something I'd wanted to do my entire life, but just never had the opportunity to. So I kind of started a bit later than most apprentices would start, these days, around the age of, anywhere from 16 to 20. And so I started a bit later than that. And yeah, that's kind of how I rolled into that kind of carpenter and joiner role. And I did an apprenticeship for, obviously I think they finished me up early. I managed to finish my apprenticeship earlier than the required 4 years, and then went on to supervise sites for Queensland Master Builders, building lots of social housing complexes and stuff like that. So that's kind of how it kind of rolled on, at that point in time, to get into a trade, and then subsequently a few years after that, another sort of acquaintance of an acquaintance called up to say, hey, are you interested in coming back to the prison system? We'd like you to set up an industries portfolio for the prison system. So that's kind of went back into the prison system, but still maintained that kind of, carpenter and joiner stuff, because that became relevant. And, I went on to uni at that point as well. I'd done some university studies in construction management, and and then the rest is kind of history. But that's how I got into that kind of prison, carpenter and joiner trade kind of stuff. Yeah.
It really brought your worlds together when you did that, which is fabulous.
Well, it did, yeah, for sure, So I left the prisons, went into the building trade, spent a lot of good years there with a lot of good stories, and, then went back to the prisons. And both of those times, interestingly enough, the prison system for women at the time I joined was about putting females into male prisons and males into females, because traditionally that had been females in females, males in males. So I was the second intake, I think, of women to go into the male prison system in New South Wales. And I think I was like the third woman or something that had actually gone into a high security men's prison. And obviously with Queensland and the apprenticeship, I was the first and only apprentice at that time. Yeah. I think I was a test case, because, the whole idea about having a woman on the job site, and people were very conscious about, do I swear, do I not swear? The toilet the toilet
Yeah.
scenario. So they had the portable toilets out on sites. I can still remember my first job. My first apprentice job with Queensland Master Builders was to go out to Wivenhoe Dam, and we built all the portable all the toilet blocks, but also all of the picnic area facades and stuff like that. And so I can remember going out into the middle of nowhere. If anyone knows, Wivenhoe, it's kind of like it's west of Brisbane, and it's, out on a big dam, and it's like an hour and a bit's drive. So you're out in the middle of nowhere, and very limited services available to tradespeople that are out there building something, let me tell you. So the whole scenario became about toilets, What toilets does she use? And I'm just like, well, I'm happy to use the same toilet as you, mate, as long as you put the lid down, or,
Keep
all
it
that
clean.
Yeah, so I think it was definitely, it wasn't too bad for me, but it was just as difficult for the boys or the men that were on site that weren't used to having to now have to accommodate for a female. And I think it makes it hard too, because I can remember clearly that I had to, while everybody was friendly, I had to prove myself, probably 5 times more than a bloke ever did.
Yeah.
I had to be quicker, I had to be faster, I had to be more accurate, that kind of stuff. So I had to really push myself to prove myself. And that was unfair, but it was the way it was at the time. And certainly you wouldn't tolerate that now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and that's obviously changed over the years. It wouldn't be like that, or to that degree at least, one would hope.
Well, one would hope, female tiler, floor tiler, wall floor and wall tiler, she started about 5 days after me, because like I said to you, there was this incredible push in Queensland at the time to put women into non-traditional trades. So I actually got some company, and a female tiler came on board. And so, we kind of both went through it together, I guess. But that's not to say, like, there was an incredible amount of people that were incredibly good and treated you as fairly as they would treat others, but there was always this group, no matter what site you went to, there was always this group of blokes that would look at you and go, you could tell what they were thinking, and that you then had to work harder to prove yourself. Yeah. Yeah, so, thankfully, I guess for me, in my sort of apprenticeship and then through the scheme, I managed to work with government organisations, of course, because it was social and community housing. So most of that was given to the apprenticeship scheme from the government, so for the apprentices to work on. So they kind of worked hand in hand. Some of the private places that, as an apprentice you got subcontracted out to, they knew what they were getting before they were getting it. Do you know what I mean? Because they would say, we have this person, obviously she's female. I don't know if they actually pointed that out, but, they knew they were getting a female. So they were always, really good in with you. And I think, to be fair, when I went out onto some private sites during this period of time, even after I finished my apprenticeship, I was working on these high-end sites, sort of just west of Brisbane, where, they're $1 million properties. When you turn up to a site to do some work, the blokes would look at you and go, she's going to pitch my roof, or, she's going to stand that frame, or she's going to lift that and going to be able to do that, But the women that, so you might have been the wives or the girlfriends or the daughters, or they were like, yay, it's a girl, it's a girl. So, but yeah, again, I guess it was just a matter of holding your own. You really needed to hold your own, and you really needed to not take a backward step. And I think my prison upbringing, where my career started, I think that definitely assisted me back then, where I was able to kind of hold my own conversation and push back on some of these things that were important to push back on. Certainly the employer was very supportive if there was ever an issue, but, I think you just had to hold your own, and you just had to show people that I can lift that 60-kilo rafter. That's not a drama. I can, plan that. I can build that. I can stand that wall up. I can climb that roof. I can pitch that rafter. I think, you really had to just do your job and let the work speak for itself. And eventually people came round. I made some incredibly good friends out of people that weren't allies when I started, that believed, and they did believe this, that women belonged in the kitchen and pregnant.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and not on the tools. you know. So yeah, I think it was just about perseverance. Hey, it was just about showing people through your actions what you were capable of doing. And I think, you know, that certainly opened the doors. You know, some people say, oh, you know, you created the space for other women to come behind you. Well, I think they create their own journey. You know, I think I've just probably exposed people to there is no difference.
Yeah.
I was brought up on a football field with a father who played football since he was under sevens, you know, and he played at a high level, and so therefore it was a lot of it. You know, we spent our weekends at football, you know, running around, carrying the ball, being the ball girl, you know, all that sort of stuff, whatever you could do. And I think, you know, the interest just grew. And again, when I was younger, it wasn't a sport that was available for women. It wasn't until I actually got older in life that it became a viable option. Yeah, look, I think all of those experiences kind of did, you know, you were kind of breaking down barriers. There's no doubt about that. You know, even in footy, you know, playing the game was like, oh my God, you know, you can see all the blokes that are playing footy going, oh my God, what are they doing? You know, and they'd come and have a bit of a laugh and a giggle about girls playing full contact sport, you know. And I think it wasn't until, you know, a few years down the track when, you know, women started playing for Australia, we started getting noticed, and, you know, men started standing up going, oh God, you know, they can hit. Oh my God, look at that hit, you know, that kind of stuff was the kind of barriers there too. And likewise, when I went into high performance coaching, you know, I was the first female to obtain their high performance coaching qualifications in the sport. And so that was incredibly hard. And again, that was not planned. Like, I don't plan to go and knock on these things down. I think it was just the era that I grew up in and the interests that I had that made them kind of all non-traditional type environments, you know. But it certainly helped me shape me as a person, but it helped shape a lot of people too and change their mindsets around what they believed a woman could or couldn't do. You know, you do have to have a certain demeanour about you, I think, to be able to navigate your way through that. Like, you need to be strong, you know, because there were some things that happened, you know, if I talk about the building site, you know, there were some things that happened early on that if I had been anybody else, you know, and not had those life experiences that I've been exposed to, I'm not sure that I would have survived, you know, because some people can be cruel. But I think it was the resilience that I had built, you know, through my life in the prison system especially, that I was able to go, you know what, it's water off a duck's back, mate, you know, just get on with the job. But also, I guess I was lucky in that when I came through at that point in time, the government was having a big push. So there was lots of, you know, there was lots of media attention. There was, you know, lots of support to get women into trades. And so employers became a little bit, oh, we're going to have to do something about our guys in this place to make them know that, you know, women are coming and they need to accept it, you know. So then there was this kind of big push, you know, politically, but a big push within business, especially government organisations, to go, you know, we're putting women into non-traditional trades. We want you to give them a go. We want you to support them. We don't want you belittling them, and we don't want you ostracising them. And, you know, all that stuff was kind of when it all really started, I think, you know, when I think back to that era, it was kind of that inclusion stuff actually started, but we didn't call it inclusion. All about equality.
Yeah, exactly. Equality is what everybody was looking for.
Well, look, I think, you know, I was obviously sitting in a senior executive role with Justice Victoria, and clearly Programmed were looking at where they wanted to take their business moving forward, I guess. And one of them was to develop, you know, a justice or social inclusion, justice or community housing type portfolio. So, you know, an executive search company came knocking on my door, and at the time I kind of went, oh, you know, I'm not really sure, you know, do I want to go across to PFM or do I want to stay in justice, you know, that kind of stuff. But I actually think after speaking to the people that I had been speaking to, you know, like Matt Prietel, Nat Hickox, you know, Mark Redemaker, because I'd met with them all, you know, Rebecca, you know, at different times I'd met with them to talk about coming across and what that role would be like. I thought, you know what, this is going to be really good. And you know, what I heard about Programmed, I liked, you know, and I think so it was a combination of things as to why I ended up with Programmed. But the role was basically to look after particular sectors and contract manage those particular sectors more than it was a specific contract. So, you know, you might have a cluster of the same kind of sectors or portfolios that you would sort of sit over and manage. So that's how I came across was, you know, they wanted to expand their justice portfolio. And, you know, now I think we're focused on, you know, really driving and delivering and expanding on community and social housing, which kind of justice sits neatly beside. You know, if you know about justice, you know, we're talking about disadvantaged people, you know, we're talking about a whole range of different clientele that sort of sit within community and justice housing. We're talking about domestic violence victims through, you know, women's housing groups and stuff, which obviously correlate with prisons. So I think, you know, that kind of portfolio management type stuff is why they brought me across to Programmed. And, you know, everything they talked about, the people that I met through that kind of, you know, informal interview type process, I went, you know what, this is something I want to be part of. And yeah, came across. Exposure that I've had, you know, I've been able to use my justice experience. I've been able to use my building background. You know, I've been able to use my exposure to community and social housing, you know, my social inclusion stuff. So when we talk about social inclusion, you know, within Program, that's about diversity, that's about disabilities, that's about, you know, LG, it's about everything. And working in the prison system and justice for so long, it covers all of that 1,000 times over, you know, in every area or every facet, whether it's courts or prisons or juvenile justice, you know, it covers everything. So I think, you know, it's a good fit. What does that mean for me? I think what it actually means for me is that, you know, for the person that is involved, so for me, it means that I need to understand my own values. I need to understand the values of others, and I need to understand the organisational values. And why is that? Because I'm very much about inclusiveness, regardless of race, gender, you know, sexual orientation. It doesn't really matter to me. And certainly I would surround myself with people of the same like mind. For people in the situation, they need to do the same. They need to, you know, if they're a young, you know, gay person coming out within Programmed, you know, on one of our program sites, you know, that can be quite daunting and quite confronting, you know, for people. And what I would say to them is, you know, be true to themselves, but surround themselves with like-minded people within that particular area, or reach out to people within Program. You know, Program are amazing. They've got so, and this is not just for the video, this is my own personal view, by the way. They've got so many things available for people that even to this day, no matter how much they kind of advertise that, I don't really think it gets to everyone that they really know the depth of what, you know, Programmed are doing. So I think, you know, people need to be true to themselves. But for those people that aren't, with, you know, the norms now that are our society, they need to wake up and smell the roses, you know, because to ostracize somebody for being different, whatever that is, that is just not accepted. And the people around them, you know, will speak up, and if they don't, they should. And I think we all have a part to play. Like, you know, here sometimes, you know, even some of my friends that will say to me, oh, that's not my problem, that's his problem. Well, actually, no, that's somebody you care about. So it becomes your problem, you know. Doesn't mean you have to go out and fight the front line and, you know, have bombs thrown at you, but you need to go and support the person and encourage the person to be themselves, you know, when they can't find the courage themselves to do it. That's what we need to do, you know. We don't necessarily have to go and stand and wave our flags, but we need to encourage the people that we can support, you know, to be themselves. Surprised about that, actually, you know, because it feels like we're at 2%, you know, 20 years ago, you know. So I'm assuming that's a national statistic, is it?
Yes.
Not a program statistic.
No,
yeah.
national.
Yeah. Look, you know, governments have pushes every now and again. So I think, you know, people can lobby government for, you know, I'm not just talking about funding, but for, you know, putting messages out there and creating, you know, organisations that support women in these non-traditional type areas or support people that are, you know, there's lots and lots of organisations out there. But I think what happens is it goes in waves. And so all of a sudden the flavour of the month is transgender. Okay, let's have a big push on transgender. Then the next month it might be, okay, let's get women into trades. You know, we don't have enough sparkies in the world, female sparkies. Let's have a big push on that. But I think that it's kind of like a centralised effort on one particular thing. Whereas I go, well, okay, what could program do? So program do a lot of stuff internally. There's no doubt about that. They support their staff. You know, there's all these types of working groups or groups, you know, to help kind of improve the acceptance and diversity in the workplace and all that. It's no good just knowing that we're programmed and advertising an electrician's job. So what we need to do is go out into the community and actually educate all people, but predominantly females, that it's okay to come and work with us as a Sparky. We'll give you a job, you know. We'll give you what you need to become an electrician. And in this day and age, there's lots of support around you. You know, it's not a taboo subject anymore. Or come and be an industrial painter with PIM. Come and be an industrial painter. I think we need to actually go out into the community and do a bit more than what we're doing just internally if we want to help, you know, bring women into those non-traditional fields within programmed even.
Yeah, and we need to normalize it more.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that needs to be considered too is, and you know, a deterrent for both, I think, the employer and the employee, is women obviously carry children and get pregnant. So, for instance, if I look at my trade in carpentry and joinery, there were a number of things that I would not be able to do once I get past a certain stage in pregnancy. And so I always had this in the back of my mind, knowing that I would have, you know, children, which I'm lucky enough to have 2 beautiful children. But I always knew that there would come a point in time where I wasn't going to be able to stand that frame up, and I wasn't going to be able to climb that roof, and I wasn't going to be able to lift that floor joist, you know, and lay that floor joist down. And so I think, you know, and nobody had the answer because they were questions I was asking. What happens to me when I have to stop work for 6 months? What happens, you know, when I can't lift for 6 months prior to that, you know? So a good sort of 12 to 18 month period where I'm not going to be able to do the normal jobs I do. It's in everybody's minds because as a woman, you need to work, but you want to have children. How can you do both when you got a trade that's like that? To be honest with you, I'm not sure, you know, things are as bad as they used to be in terms of that acceptance, but certainly I think that it's a whole for tradeswomen that there is no solution that is made public anyway around if you work for us in a non-traditional trade and you do fall pregnant, here's what we'll do for you. Oh, I think there's 2 different things there. So starting your career in a trade, make sure it's what you want. Definitely make sure it's what you want, because as modern as things have become and as much policy and procedure and legislation that's been put around to protect women, there is still that element of bias in the community. And, you know, you need to have resilience to be able to deal with that. And, you know, it isn't acceptable if it is still there. And they certainly, if they, you know, expose themselves to you about that, it's not acceptable. And you need to be confident that people, like programmed, are going to support you if something like that does happen to you. But, you know, be resilient, make sure it's what you want and kick on with it, because, like, seriously, there is nothing better for me than being able to build something and stand back and go, oh, I did that, you know, oh, I did that, you know, that kind of stuff. So the rewards are, you know, inevitable. And then within the trade, there is room to grow. You know, like I was supervising building sites within 12 months of finishing my apprenticeship, you know, so, you know, if you apply, it's like everything. If you apply yourself and people can see that you're good at what you do, you don't have to put your hand up. They'll come to you, you know, they'll come to you, let your work do the talking for you, basically. But yeah, I think there's always room to prove. And even if I think about programs, so program definitely, you know, they have all these available kind of trade avenues for people, and including women, to get into. But it doesn't mean you have to be the chippy that turns up on site and constructs, you know, the frame for the house every day. because when you look outside of that, you know, and open your eyes up, there's so many more avenues that you can use your skill sets and, you know, transferable skill sets to get into, you know, leadership type roles. You know, that's clearly evident. I think what we just have to do, all of us, is just understand what is that avenue and where is it I want to go, to be able to then open your eyes and follow that. So I think, you know, starting out, definitely be resilient and remember that there are people around you that will support you when you come across those, you know, now anomalies. But certainly if you want to kind of expand on that, you need to decide where it is you want to go and look outside of your, you know, look outside of your box and, you know, have a look a little bit broader. Don't ever be afraid either, is the advice I'd give them, to ask as many questions as you can, because no question, that old adage about no question is a stupid question, it is completely true. You know, people hopefully will be honest with you and provide you with the answers that you need, but also look for a good mentor. You know, I found through my career, you know, probably more so in justice, that over the time, I really looked for good mentors to be able to, I always knew, you know, my goal in prison was always to run my own prison one day. You know, I set that goal pretty early, you know, but then I had to work out, how do I achieve to get that? You know, what do I need to do to get that? Not only from the, you know, the working side of things, but also that, you know, to run your own prison, you need to be a leader. You know, so then what kind of leader am I going to be? What kind of leader do I want to be? And quite often people pick a mentor that is probably not a really good leader, you know, especially don't have people skills, you know, those really good people skills, you know. I remember one leader saying to me one day, Karen, if you want to be a good leader, you get more bees with honey. So I'm like, okay, more bees with honey. That means I have to be better at what I do. I have to be kinder at what I do. You know, I have to be, yes, I can be assertive and authoritarian if I need to be, but I still do that with kindness, you know, that kind of stuff, because that's what he means, you know. You'll get more people that want to follow you. You'll get more people that want to work with you, you know, that kind of stuff. So I think get a really good mentor around you throughout your career, and don't just think that, you know, your boss, your direct boss, is that mentor. It may not be that person, you know. It may be somebody on the peripheral for you, maybe somebody outside the organisation, you know, that you work within. So I think, yeah, those few things I think is important for somebody starting out in a career of any description, really.